Welcome back to another episode of I Bought a Farm. Now what? Just to remind everybody what the situation is, we had a local land extension service here in Kentucky and asked us what they could do with their 37-acre hill farm. They needed a better plan to utilize this resource, and they wanted their plan to include something that might accidentally make them a little bit of money. How weird is that? So in one of our previous episodes, we talked about where do we find information, and we talked about the local county extension office and utilizing our county extension agents as a vital source of unbiased research. And then we also talked about taking care of the soil. Our local agent, Adam Probst, went out with us and helped us take soil samples, and we're going to fertilize according to that soil because regardless of the enterprise, okay, we're going to need to take care of our soil. And today we're going to try to discuss what enterprise we might consider for use on this property. And our guest today is Dr. Kenny Burdine. Dr. Kenny is a livestock marketing specialist here at the University of Kentucky and does an outstanding job of looking at enterprises, evaluating enterprises. And the best thing about Kenny is he's a numbers guy, and he doesn't particularly care about, well, my daddy did it this way or anything like that. He just throws her down and looks at the numbers and tries to make sense of it. So, Kenny, welcome to our new video docu-series, and I can't wait to dive through some of these questions and see what our best options are. So I'm going to describe the farm a little bit more to you, and actually I'm going to pull the farm up, Kenny, and as we go through, I'll just describe the farm a little bit. This is the farm overall. The two sections that are highlighted are the two that we're going to use for this project. I'm going to pull the big one down and blow it up a little bit. What you can't see from this Google Earth is the topography, but this is your standard Kentucky hill farm, Kenny. Up here at the top, where that is sectioned off, my guess is years ago that was a tobacco patch, because that's at the top of the hill, and there's a nice little 2 to 4% slope all the way down to the road. We have one pond, we have a barn, and we have one cattle water, and that's about it. Another section that we're going to use is a little 4-acre section down here next to the owner's house, and it is fenced off, and there are two waters with city water there, but it's only 4 acres. Okay. But this also is a hill. If you look at the trees on the bottom right, or if you're thinking about direction, kind of southwest on that field, there's a tree line. That's the top of the hill, and it pretty severe. I'd say 5 to 6% slope down to the creek. So it's pretty difficult to do much other than grass. But just looking at that farm, and Kenny, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so that we can focus in on you. What are some of our options? Okay. What are some things we could do with property like that we just happen to buy?
Yeah, well, of course, a question a lot of us get from time to time. And folks want to look at it, what can it generate some income, or the bare minimum cover taxes aren't looking good. So there's things to chew on. So one thing you talked about less was the slope of the farm. So I'm assuming row crop's not an option on this farm. I assume that's the case.
There's that one little patch at the top of the hill, but it's about 3 acres.
Yeah, not enough to consider, right?
Yeah, it's been difficult to raise too many acres or too many bushels of corn up there. So
absolutely. So you kind of throw that out. So this is a livestock farm. Rental rates on livestock farms, depending on where you are, if you look at Greg Hallich's land survey, $30 to $50 about where it tends to land, and that's not attractive to most folks. And this, most folks want it to be a productive type operation that they're involved with themselves anyway. So that's an option, but probably not the first one we want to think about. In terms of things they could think about on the livestock side, you've got 37 acres here. Could you run cows on it? Possibly. But given the size, the number of acres, you're not going to run very many cows. You start thinking about, the management side of that, the cost you have to set a small cow calf operation. If you're probably talking 20 cows max, probably not a viable option. And I'm guessing that's probably not an interest in the person anyway. Am I correct?
Yeah, the owner they've had cows 25 years ago on their dad's original farm. Not interested at all in calving cows out.
Understand.
I mean, it's totally understandable. You kind of got to be in love with the cow calf industry to want to be in the cow calf industry. And really, what these owners want is they want a viable option to make a little bit more money than cash rent. They cash rented it last year, and they didn't make enough. And so they're wanting to look at different options that don't involve calving cows out.
So, two that come to mind. One, and maybe even the simplest one to think about, would be something like just a stocker operation. Running steers, running heifers on grass, buying them in the spring, selling them in the fall. You're taking advantage of your forage base. Especially if you buy, preconditioned or well-managed calves, the management can be at least more manageable than a cow-calf operation. That's something that you want. The other one that you and I talked about was thinking about a heifer development enterprise where I buy, young weaned heifers and then, keep them for a period of time and then sell them as bred heifers, probably something like a year. So it's kind of come to mind. What were you kind of thinking about, Les?
Yeah, our screen froze up a little bit. There we go. In the world of the pandemic, sometimes the Zoom and internet access isn't perfect, so we'll just have to deal with that. Yeah. Well, one of the things, and what I really wanted to get in with you and talk in this series about is, if we bought heifers, we have options, right? Because who knows what the market's going to do in the next 6 months. If I knew because we are at the bottom end of the cow cycle, right?
Should be.
Okay, so for our viewers that don't really know what that means, is cattle prices run in cycles. Sometimes we're really high, sometimes we're really low, and we go back up and so forth. And right now, our industry is in the bottom end of the cycle. And we were ready, I think, Kenny, to start seeing higher prices this spring, and then coronavirus, right? And all markets are a little bit crazy right now. And so it seems like we're going to stay down on the bottom end of this for a little while. And then, who knows what's going to happen when, number one, who knows when we're going to come out of this stuff.
Right.
And number two, who knows what that immediate market's going to look like, right?
It's going to take us some time to work through this. The bottom line, I don't think we know how long, but this is quite a demand shock that's going to linger for a while. So unfortunately, it's going to keep prices a little bit lower, I think, for a little bit longer, which actually creates some opportunities too in terms of buying calves or thinking about longer investments like breeding stock. So we're on the same page for sure.
So if we bought heifers, if the market responds quickly, and let's say September, our grass is running out and we decide we don't want to put feed in them and the markets look good, we can just sell right then, right? Or whenever the grass is starting to run out. But if the market hasn't recovered yet, we could go ahead and put a little bit more investment in these animals to hope to capture some added value by selling them as bred females. And it just seems like to me, in the situation that we're at right this second in the world, options are great, right? And having more marketing options probably gives us the best opportunity to capture a little bit of profit at some point in time.
Flexibility. It comes out of flexibility.
Yep. So, okay, so grazing heifers, and then coming back to the decision later about whether we're going to continue them as replacement heifers or not might be our best option. So do you have any information about what it costs to develop a heifer all the way to and breed her and sell her as a replacement heifer?
Yes, I'll share my screen too, Les, and I assume everybody can see that now. But individualized based on the kind of heifers the person buys, what they choose to do. So look at this kind of as a starting point. Where do I start thinking in terms of my prices and so forth? But walk through these really quickly, Les, and stop me with questions anytime. But just something as simple as valuing that heifer right now that I'd be buying for this program is really tough. But based on this week's market report, 550-pound weaned heifer that was born last fall, she's probably worth about $1.30 or so. So she's worth $725 right now. I'm going to have fairly low cost of keeping her through this first summer. I'm probably going to be able to use pasture for the most part. So I've got some pasture rental rates in there just to kind of capture opportunity cost on that own ground. And I've got, pasture maintenance cost in there, just ballpark stuff. And I'm assuming I'm going to take about 3/4 of an acre for each one of those heifers that I'm going to run.
Hey,
In
Kenny,
the winter,
on your pasture maintenance, does that include fertilizer?
that's a great question. So the way that I look at that, and it's going to vary, okay, but I tend to go fairly bare bones. So it probably includes some P and K, on occasion, maybe every 3 years or so. It probably includes some seeding on some sort of rotating basis. The one that comes up every single year that folks tend to forget is pasture clipping. But you're going to clip those pastures once or twice, and that's where a lot of that comes in. So, I could say that could be in the ballpark of $50-$60 an acre. I could probably get by and spend even a bit less, but I'm kind of using 35 as a baseline less to give you an idea.
Okay.
Does that sound logical to you?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So good question though on where it comes from. And pasture clipping is one that tends to be forgotten, but it's a pretty significant cost in terms of what it actually costs in terms of time and fuel and machinery wear and tear to do that. That next winter she's bigger. I'm not a nutritionist, but I basically got a ration here where about 2/3 of it is coming from hay, and another third from purchased feed over the winter. So I'm going to have some cost carrying her through the winter. And one of the nice things that you said, Les, was the idea of evaluating this in the fall and saying, okay, now do I want to sell a feeder heifer this fall, or do I want to take it through the winter and think about selling a bred heifer come spring? The way that this program works in the spring is, my costs are kind of backloaded. So if I make that decision this fall, I've not incurred those expensive winter feeding costs yet. So I can kind of think about that come fall. I've got vet medicine costing here at $35 a head. That's going to vary, obviously. And then I've got breeding cost at $50 a head, whether that be AI or natural service, think of what that is. But I'm going to think of $50 on that. I did figure 2% death loss. Like any other program, there's a chance that I'm going to lose some. So 2% straightforward means if I have 100, I lose 2, right? If I'm going to be doing this with 20 heifers, it's going to be more 0, 5, or 10%. But bottom line is you want to build in that there's some risk there in terms of loss. For what we're looking at right now, I've actually built in a little bit for hauling and a little bit for commission. So I'm kind of assuming that I'm going to sell these heifers in some sort of sale environment where I'm actually going to pay commission. If I were selling privately, wouldn't have that. But so, Charlie, what would you say, Les? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's smart to include that because we don't know what our marketing options are right now. I mean, we're going to do the 3 different videos in this series that talk about marketing options with marketing professionals, and not only on the purchase end but on the sale end. And so we need that included in this budget.
So it's in there to kind of get us started. I dropped $15 in there. I always have another category in my budgets because I tend to forget things as an economist, and every farm's different. So I always kind of have another category that I like to include. I'm going to go on to appreciation just real quickly. I just dropped $30 in there to think about depreciation on facilities and so forth. So we'll take a minute and talk about both interest and loss on heifers that aren't kept very quickly. So with interest, the simple way to think about it is, if I had an operating loan, right? So if I'm going to buy this heifer calf, this spring, and then sell a bred heifer next spring, I'm tying up that money for a year. So if I'm on an operating note, whatever that interest rate is, I've actually got to charge that as an expense. Same thing on those expenses. Now, the convention that's oftentimes used is to use half of those expenses. And the idea being that the expenses I incur on day one, I've almost got full interest on. The expenses at the end, I have no interest on. So the convention is to kind of use half, and that kind of splits the difference. So I'm kind of making the assumption in the budget that I'm actually borrowing money to do this. Understand if I'm not, then that $45 is a return to the money that I'm, using of my own. So
Right.
it's relevant either way, in my opinion. But the assumption I'm making is operating note. The very last line there, I'll explain quickly. I talk about this a lot in Master Academy with cow-calf operators who develop their own heifers. And I kind of jokingly say sometimes, if I was going to replace 5 cows in my herd, how many heifers would I hold back to do that? And the answer is not 5, right? So sometimes there'll be a cost in developing heifers that I end up not keeping as breds. And then the same thing applies here, right? I may buy 20 heifers, with the intention of selling bred heifers, but I don't end up selling them all as bred heifers.
Right.
And in some case, I might lose some money on some of those that don't make it. Not always, maybe I won't. But, kind of simple illustration, think about, a simple example where I've got 5 heifers that I'm holding back. And maybe 4 of those 5 I sell as bred heifers. The 5th one, for whatever reason, doesn't do well, and I lose $100 on that heifer. Okay.
Right.
That $100 loss from that one has got to be borne and spread across the 4 that I did end up selling. So that's exactly where the 20% comes from. So I've got a $100 loss spread across 4, the other 80%. So that's where the $25 comes from. So it's just something worth thinking about, that there may be a cost there that's kind of hard to quantify. So anyway, Les, I guess if you just asked me to give you an idea of what I thought I would have right now in terms of developing a heifer that I'm going to buy as a weaned heifer now, and then have a bred heifer sometime about a year from now, somewhere in that $1,250 to $1,300 range is probably where we would land right now.
So. Yep. So about 715 to get her to the farm.
Yep.
And then about $500, $550 to get her developed.
Absolutely.
And ready for sale.
And that includes interest, that includes, some transportation, and that includes some of those sale expenses that you wouldn't have if you're selling. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, that sounds great. I'll share these data with the landowner.
Cool.
We'll talk about the options, and what we're going to strongly consider is purchasing heifers. We'll purchase 5 weight plus or minus heifers. So those that, like you described before, those that were born in the fall that have just come off the dam and have been weaned. We're going to look at 3 different possible sources. So we're going to look at the stockyards. So I'll interview Jim Akers. We're going to look at an order buyer. So I'll interview Val Shields, and then we'll try to find a local source for about 30 heifers that we can purchase and get delivered to the farm pretty soon. So that's the current plan. Of course, the owner makes all the decisions here, and we'll see what he has to say. But I think we found an enterprise. I think we found something that gives us flexibility, both with the market and maybe even with a little bit of added value, because if the market completely turns, and since we're at the bottom end of the cow cycle, bred heifers might be worth some money next spring. And if that's the case, we may end up being able to make $300-$400 a heifer, which would be pretty nice.
Yeah, if I was just going to guess, I would say they're worth $1,500-$1,600, in the spring. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, and if the heifers, if we get good heifers, do a really nice job of developing them, and have them ready and in a good sale, I think we have an opportunity for him to make a little bit of cash. So
the other thing we could do, Les, it would actually be kind of neat if we talked again in the fall, is you redo this, except now a lot of those costs are sunk, and we just revalue her as a 800-pound feeder heifer, right? And then do the exact same thing from there.
Well, let's just make that plan. Somewhere in that September, October range, let's get back together and reevaluate.
Probably about, I'm guessing about the time you'd want a breeder or less. When would that be? That'd be the best time to think.
We'll breed her right around Thanksgiving.
Yes, that's perfect then. So sometime in the fall where we can make the decision before we incur those winter costs and decide about the breeding costs. So
Perfect.
good to visit with you,
Sounds
Les.
great.
Glad.
Thanks for joining us today, Kenny. And I hope this is a valuable learning tool for cattlemen across the country, and in particular here in Kentucky. I know I'm having a lot of fun putting it together, and this is going to be a great opportunity for our cattlemen to just have something to do, maybe when they're sitting at home in the middle of this global pandemic and socially distancing from everybody. So thank you. And thanks everyone for joining this video series. Again, I bought a farm. So now what? Thanks, Kenny. We'll see you guys later.
Thanks, Les.